When anaerobic glycolysis is utilized as an energy system, the concentration of glucose or glycogen decline and the concentration of lactate increases within the cells. Macam kita tengok tadi, bila exercise digunakan, anaerobic exercise digunakan untuk energy system, of course, the concentration of glucose or glycogen akan decline and then the concentration of lactate akan increase. Okay. So what happened to this metabolic byproduct? Previously, lactate had been thought of as a metabolic waste product and sometimes kita panggil dia sebagai poison of the muscles. However, an important distinction must be made between the lactate molecule and the acidity that is associated with high intensity exercise when glycolysis is used as the predominant energy system. Our body actually has several processes to buffer acidity, but the body's buffering capacity may be overwhelmed by acidosis that occurs during high intensity exercise. So this acidity may result in an impairment of cell processes. Therefore, the acidity associated with high intensity exercise may be detrimental to the cells, but far from being a waste product, the lactate molecule is used by cells in the body as an important fuel source. Kalau kita tengok kat sini, okay. What we call as when lactate is produced in cells, such as those in exercise muscles, the increase in lactate concentration results in the movement of lactate molecules out of the cells and into the blood. Once in the blood, lactate molecules can be distributed throughout the body where they can be taken up by other highly aerobic tissue, for example, heart, liver, kidney, and metabolized aerobically. The more lactate that needs to be oxidized, the more aerobic metabolism must be increased to accomplish this task. Just as the creatinine phosphate system is not completely anaerobic, neither is the anaerobic glycolysis energy system. Anaerobic glycolysis relies upon the aerobic energy system to metabolize lactate. So the final product of the glycolysis. This is another example of the integration of the body's energy system, iaitu between the anaerobic dan juga aerobic energy system. Before we go this day, in addition to what we call aerobic metabolism of lactate for energy, actually the body can use lactate in other ways. The necessary enzymes are not present in muscles to take lactate through the chemical reactions to make glucose, that is gluconeogenesis. This process kita panggil sebagai Cori cycle, if you still remember, and it must take place in the liver, which doesn't have the necessary enzymes. So during the exercise, lactate that is produced by exercise muscle can be transported to the liver, and then it will be used to create the glucose, which is then released from the liver into the blood, and this will help to maintain blood glucose concentration and providing carbohydrates to other cells in the body. So the major advantage of the anaerobic glycolysis energy systems are they are relatively fast ATP productions, and the reliance upon a fuel source that is present in large amounts, which are the glucose and glycogen, and it has potential usefulness of lactate is end product. So the major disadvantage of this what we call anaerobic glycolysis energy system is the relatively short duration of this energy system due to the metabolic acidosis associated with its use at a high rate. So the key points that you have to remember for this anaerobic glycolysis system is that this glycolysis is a series of chemical steps, and it beginning with the glucose or glycogen, it depends, and it will result in the formation of ATP. And glycolysis replenishes ATP quickly, although as quickly as the CRP energy system. And glycolysis is the predominant energy system that is for high intensity or repeated exercise bouts and results in the formation of lactate. And lactate that is produced in exercise muscles can be metabolized aerobically by a variety of tissues. And when we talk about an aerobic glycolysis system, is actually kita juga kena belajar pasal lactate threshold sebab dia ada kaitan. So what is lactate threshold? Actually lactate kita tahu kan it can be produced by exercising muscles and it is transported into the blood where it is often monitored by exercise physiologists as an indication of exercise intensity. So as exercise increases in intensity, bila exercise is increases in terms of intensity, there is usually a little increase in the concentration of lactate in the body initially. Once the intensity reaches at certain level, however, the amount of lactate in the blood begins to increase dramatically. This point of sudden increase we call as a lactate threshold. I will show you the figure after this. Okay. So this point of exercise intensity is often erroneously referred to as an aerobic threshold, with the explanation that this is the point of exercise intensity where aerobic metabolism is insufficient and anaerobic glycolysis suddenly becomes active, that producing lactate. However, lactate is produced at lower level of exercise intensity in small amount, but the lactate concentration in blood doesn't increase because lactate is being removed from the blood by the highly aerobic tissues and oxidize as fast as the exercising muscles are releasing the lactate into the blood. The lactate threshold more accurately represents the level of exercise intensity in which lactate production has increased to the point where it has overwhelmed the body's lactate removal mechanism. Okay. Although the term anaerobic threshold has achieved widespread usage, should be eliminated in favor for the more accurate term of lactate threshold, or kita panggil sebagai LT. LT. Okay. So what is the practical significance of we want to know about this lactate threshold? It has been associated with an increased intensity that can be sustained for long periods during endurance exercise. For example, lactate threshold correlates highly with the race pace for a distance runner. A pace too much faster result in fatigue and poor results, whereas a pace too much lower result in less than optimal performance. So this is the correlation of about the show. Okay, sebab itulah that's why we need to cool down after the exercise. Actually, exercise cool down tu actually is a recovery, the active recovery from exercise. When you do a cool down, actually you facilitate lactate removal, because of the increased perfusion of blood through the liver and heart, and also when you do cool down, actually can increase the blood flow in muscles because muscle tissue oxidize lactate. Sebab tu kan kalau kita nak hilangkan rasa lemah-lemah dalam badan, dan kalau kita tak buat cool down dengan betul-betul, itu yang akan menyebabkan kaki cramp dan sebagainya. Itu because of the lactate accumulation. So in order to remove all the lactate, then we need to do a cool down. Okay, then we move on to our last or the third energy systems, or what we call as a oxidative phosphorylation energy system. So the oxidative phosphorylation energy system is actually the major limitation of the two anaerobic energy systems is their relatively short duration of action on the order of seconds or minutes. Kalau macam CPR, CRP, creatine phosphate energy system, it's just last 5 to 10 seconds. Kalau anaerobic glycolysis, it's just 1 to 2 minutes. And that's the limitation of the energy system. However, the aerobic energy system is known as oxidative phosphorylation. Is the energy system that can be used to supply ATP on a virtually limitless basis as long as oxygen and source of fuel are available. Oxidative phosphorylation is a process by which carbohydrates, fats or proteins can be metabolized through a series of chemical reactions to release the energy necessary to rephosphorylate ADP to ATP. So there are three major phases. Number one is what we call as a carbohydrate, fat, protein metabolized aerobically through the Krebs cycle, and also the electron transport chain. Okay, so for all this we produce the ATP. Kalau kita tengok sikit So the oxidative phosphorylation process which takes place in the mitochondria is made up of three major phases. And the first phase is carbohydrates, fats and proteins. They are prepared to be metabolized aerobically. The second major phase is the Krebs cycles, also known as a tricarboxylic acid TCA cycle, or the citric acid cycle. The Krebs cycle produces a very limited amount of ATP directly. So its primary function is to oxidize or remove electron from the compound produced from the breakdown of carbohydrates, fats and protein. So the electron removed in the Krebs cycles are used in the final phase, which is what we call as a electron transport chain. These electrons are passed through a series of chemical reactions which release energy to rephosphorylate ADP into ATP. And as the electrons pass through the electron transport chain, the final electron sector is oxygen. So making this is as a what we call as a anaerobic energy system. Okay, so even more what we call more so than anaerobic glycolysis, oxidative phosphorylation is a complex series of chemical reactions involving many steps, intermediates, enzymes, and as well as cofactors. In fact, if the starting point is glucose, the complete aerobic metabolism involves 124 steps. Okay, what is about 124 steps, 30 chemical compound, and also 27 enzymes. Compare that to glycolysis, where the starting point is also glucose, but the process only involve, if you can remember just now, it only involve 18 steps. Okay, compared to this one is 124 steps. Okay, kalau orang kata glycolysis tadi dia ada 12 chemical compound compared to aerobic metabolism, it has like 30 chemical compound, and this one it has a 27 enzymes compared to the glycolysis is only have 11 enzymes. So it is not just the number of steps, compounds or enzymes that makes an aerobic metabolism ni sangat complicated. Once the reaction progress to pyruvate, the pyruvate molecule must be transported into mitochondria for oxidative phosphorylation to proceed. In addition, oxygen must be transported from the lungs via the blood and through the muscle cells into the mitochondria to be available to pick up the electrons. Once again, a detailed knowledge of this metabolic pathway is important for a thorough understanding of sports nutrition and explain after this, but the basic of oxidative phosphorylation have been condensed in in the previous. Kita akan tengok lepas ni go through one by one. Okay. Kalau kita tengok dari segi this one, you can go through this video. It will show you the pathway of this what we call aerobic metabolism. Okay, so we go to one by one. We go to about the Krebs cycles. Okay. If we can see how the carbohydrates oxidize in the Krebs cycles, once glucose, or what we call as a glycogen, has been broken down into pyruvate, it's broken down into pyruvate, the pyruvate molecules are shuttled into one of many mitochondria in a typical muscle cells. Remember that for each glucose molecule metabolized, 2 pyruvate molecules are formed by glycolysis. Kalau kita ingat balik tadi, and therefore 2 turns of the Krebs cycles can be completed. Although a high energy phosphate, GTP, is produced by the Krebs cycle, the major function of the Krebs cycle is to oxidize or remove electrons from compound going through the cycle for later use in the